Chapter 82. The cold steel saw blade pressed against her body through a layer of clothing. The pouring rain made a rustling sound on the iron shell of the truck. Siddle looked down, her face expressionless, her fingertips pressed on the lock, quietly listening to the movement in the rainstorm. The people in the car were stunned by her tactics, unconsciously holding their breath, silently not making a sound. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. In the pouring rain, the rumble of the truck seemed near and far, the deformed man screamed shrilly, the truck behind rushed forward, splashing blood and water everywhere. While bandaging his leg wound, John shouted to Colm, "Can you drive faster? That thing is almost catching up." Colm gritted his teeth, "I'm at my wit's end." There were too many potholes and deep puddles on the road. If he increased his speed it was easy to skid and lose control. The deformed man might not care about safety, speeding up to try to catch up, but Colm couldn't do it. Siddle turned back to look at them and said, "No need to speed up." She started her body, making her frozen wrists more flexible, and at the same time tucked the pistol into the rope around her waist. "Maintain speed, wait for him to catch up here," she calmly ordered, absent-mindedly glancing at them. "Remember to lie down and hide well later. If anyone was accidentally shot, it would be considered an unfortunate event. After all, she still had to prepare to face the bullets, fight that thing. Charlie, what if he catches up and crashes our car?" Siddle said indifferently, "Then that is the calamity that you must encounter in your life. God has destined you to experience these things, there is no way to avoid it." If even she couldn't control the situation, then the group of people in this car were truly hopeless. They could only wait. "Charlie." He lowered his head in anger and continued to treat his wife's wounds. Siddle finished arranging everything, ignoring them and attentively listening to the movements of the deformed man in the rain. The gunshots were no longer as intense as before, but occasionally there was the sound of gunshots hitting the car's iron shell. The sound of the car chasing was getting louder and louder, causing everyone to become anxious and nervous at the same time. They didn't know what Siddle was going to do. Siddle pressed her ear to the shield, quietly calculating the time. _ 30 seconds left. 20 seconds. Boom boom boom. 10 seconds. The sound of the car chasing was getting louder and louder. Colm endured the pressure of being caught up, gritting his teeth and maintaining a slow speed. Occasionally he glanced at the back of the truck in the rearview mirror. Rumble. 5 seconds. Siddle let go of her finger on the lock. The rear cover of the car opened outwards and shook continuously under the impact of the fierce wind. At the same time, the slender girl jumped high like a nimble deer. She did not jump out of the car and landed on the ground. Her destination was not the muddy road. Siddle had already jumped onto the front of the truck behind her. The sky was dark. In the pouring rain and wind, she and the deformed man sat in the driver's seat of the car, holding a long gun in their left hand, pressing the steering wheel with their right hand, briefly looking straight into each other's eyes. The deformed man was stunned for a moment. Almost at the same time, Siddle swung the crowbar in her left hand and hooked it into the side frame of the shattered windshield. With the force of the crowbar hooked into the frame of the car, her slender waist and legs exerted force at the same time. In a flash she jumped from the front of the truck to the side of the truck, her right hand tightly gripping the rear frame of the truck. All of this action was done within a few seconds. After hanging on the car, Siddle did not stop. She used both feet to step on the protrusion on the side of the car, released her right hand and pulled out the gun to shoot several times at the door. The car door lock was shot to pieces. At this moment the deformed driver finally pointed the gun at the girl hanging outside the door of the speeding truck. Siddle kicked the car door open a few times. The old car door made a clanking sound and fell into the car. Siddle's left hand still held the crowbar hooked to the car frame. Her right hand moved to grab the roof of the car, facing the black gun barrel, hearing the clinking sound in front of her chest, sparks flying everywhere. She had already guessed that this deformed man would miss. Siddle's expression was expressionless, her eyes did not even blink, in the next moment, she concentrated her strength on her waist, her two legs kicked hard at the chest of the deformed man driving the car. At the same time as the kick, she took advantage of the situation to get into the car, pulled the crowbar back in her left hand, held the steering wheel with her right hand, and without hesitation, punched the deformed man straight in the face, who was kicked back, hearing the sound of his nose breaking. The deformed man was in pain, roaring angrily, one hand still holding the gun tightly, but he couldn't use it in the narrow space. He let go of the gun, pulled out a long and narrow boning knife from his belt, the blade covered in blood. The deformed man with a distorted face stabbed the boning knife into Siddle's back, the tip of the knife cutting through the air creating a sharp sound. Siddle was looking for the brake pedal, but there was a person sitting in the driver's seat, so for a moment she couldn't step on it, she could only turn the steering wheel to turn to one side. The corner of her eye caught a glimpse of a bloody knife stabbing towards her. Not paying attention to the direction of the car, she lowered her head and leaned to the side, but at this moment the weakness of the electric saw was also revealed. Having such a large weapon strapped to her body made it extremely inconvenient to move in a narrow space. The knife did not hit her, but Siddle did not have time to breathe a sigh of relief. As soon as she let go, the truck had a problem. There was no one driving anymore. The car lost control, skidded and rushed to the side of the road. In just a few seconds, the deformed man's car chasing Colm's truck lost control and slid to the side of the road. With the naked eye one could see the two people sitting next to the driver's seat of the car struggling for the steering wheel. Charlie was shocked and opened his mouth. John almost stood up immediately when he saw the chasing car change direction and run into the woods. He shouted to Colm, "Stop. We have to go check it out." The knife was stuck hard into the body of the car. The deformed man pulled it out twice but couldn't pull it out. He shouted, "Ah, ah, ah," then grabbed the rifle and shot straight at Siddle's face. With no one controlling the steering wheel, the car slid from the road into the woods, but still sped up and rushed very fast. When it hit the first tree, the car shook violently, then gained momentum and staggered, crashing into tree after tree, going deep into the woods. The situation became critical. The deformed man tried to shoot Siddle in the face, and she could only try to grab the steering wheel with one hand, and the other hand held the gun barrel and pushed it aside. The gunshot rang out, the bullet flew so fast that it almost grazed her cheek. Seeing that the deformed man didn't care about losing control, Siddle took a deep breath, and in a few short seconds decided to let go of the steering wheel. Another shocking collision, the deformed man's center of gravity was unstable, and he fell backwards. Siddle took the opportunity to grab his gun and throw it out of the car. The car door behind her was broken, and heavy rain poured down and splashed into the car. The raindrops hit Siddle's back. She pulled out her pistol and aimed at the deformed man's chest. The gunshot rang out. At the same time, she quickly held the steering wheel with her other hand and tried to turn the car. The truck had already driven for a while, but the deformed man was sitting in the driver's seat. In the darkness Siddle couldn't find the brake pedal in time. She could only use one hand to hold the steering wheel, using her gun to smash the driver's side door. After using force to open the door, the deformed man's body fell down. Siddle quickly lowered her head, found the one she wanted to use among the pedals and stomped on it. Screech. The truck finally stopped. Siddle bent down slightly and jumped out of the car. Then there was a splat sound. She stepped on a puddle of mud. Siddle. The sticky and cold feeling spread to her ankles. She regretted not wearing rain boots this time when she went out. The deformed man's body was thrown a dozen meters away from where the car stopped. The truck behind had been hit many times and was no longer completely damaged. Siddle didn't expect to be able to drive this thing out of here anymore. Before tying the chainsaw to her body, she threw her cell phone to Belch. Now that there was no light source, it seemed like a cold silence was gradually spreading in this vast dark jungle space. Siddle muttered a few words in a low voice, sneezed, she sniffed, rubbed the tip of her nose, and then walked out of the muddy puddle. She tried to go back the same way, to see if she could find a way out of the forest. Siddle quickly walked towards the deformed man's body. Just to be sure, She thought about it over and over again, and finally put another bullet into the monster's head. After walking for another 2 minutes, Siddle saw John holding a flashlight, followed by Charlie holding a shotgun. "Hey!" Seeing Siddle, John's eyes lit up, and he waved at her, "Over here." Siddle was a little surprised. She didn't expect these people to come looking for her. But thinking about it, John was a policeman after all, so it wasn't strange. She shook off the water from her body, untied the rope to separate the chainsaw from her body, and walked slowly forward. The group returned to the truck. Colm started driving again. Siddle threw the chainsaw back into the truck, and she heard John thanking her. "I didn't know that the person blocking the road was with those monsters. If it weren't for you, everyone would have been killed." This policeman was really old-fashioned when he got serious, but he was also an upright person and wouldn't hesitate to admit his mistakes. Siddle had no intention of dragging him out on this matter. She glanced at the group and said, "When we get to town, Penelope and I will wait in the car first. Charlie and I will go get the belt. Belch, you come with me." Although the girl's voice was very small, no one refuted her at the moment. Even Charlie, who didn't want to leave his wife, was silent. After putting on her raincoat again, Siddle found that her hands were shaking slightly, probably because she had used too much force in the struggle just now, and her right palm had been cut, but only now did she feel the dull pain. The flesh and blood in the wound had turned white, and the blood stains had probably been washed away by the rain. Siddle calmly looked over, said nothing, and quietly pressed her palm down, her trembling arm hidden in her raincoat, as if nothing had happened, and asked Colm, who was driving, "How much longer?" Everyone knew what Siddle wanted to ask. Almost. Perhaps because he had escaped the pursuit of those deformed men, Colm's voice was somewhat relieved. He said, "We'll be there in 2 or 3 minutes. At that time, I'll take everyone to the gas station to buy a belt, and then take everyone back. This damn thing is finally over," Charlie said emotionally. John looked a little tired and closed his eyes. After pressing his forehead, he took out his phone and planned to report what happened here to the police station. However, after looking at the GPS, the policeman's expression changed slightly. "Here, why can't I determine the specific location?" he asked Colm in front. "Oh, you're asking that?" Colm grinned. "This forest and my small town were abandoned more than 10 years ago. It's probably impossible to find the location on the current map." The meaning of this sentence was, if there was an emergency in that abandoned town that didn't even exist on the map, even if you reported it to the police, they wouldn't be able to find your specific location. "Siddle," she said casually, "why was that town abandoned?" "I don't know," Colm replied casually. After thinking for a few seconds, he said, "That year, a famous wax sculptor came to town. She only liked to carve wax figures. After settling down there, she often held exhibitions in town. So now there are wax statues everywhere in town. After that, something happened to that artist, probably died of an illness. Not long after she died, her husband also passed away from depression. After that, the town became deserted. Without that attractive artist, there were no exhibitions to see. Gradually no one moved to this town anymore. After all the people who lived in that era left, the town naturally became deserted." As he spoke, he suddenly stopped the car. "Wait a minute, I'll get off to go to the bathroom for a bit." This was just a euphemism. Colm meant that he was going to pee in the nearby woods. The man hurriedly got out of the car, disappeared into the woods, and disappeared in an instant. Siddle, she originally wanted to call Colm to stop, but she didn't expect him to run so fast. The others also looked towards the woods where Colm entered. "Charlie, what should we do? Should we wait for him to come back?" "No," Siddle jumped out of the car first. "He won't come back." Belch jumped out of the car after Siddle. Charlie was still stunned, saying, "Impossible? He left the car here. If he doesn't come back, how can he go home?" Siddle said, "We're here." She squinted slightly, walked forward a bit and saw a road appear in front of her. Looking along the small road, a deserted small town stood tall in the pouring rain. This was probably the town that had been abandoned for more than 10 years.